We got so much going on here at Sportsnaut. Just hit that notifications bell. You will get notified when we have something new up there. So we certainly appreciate you guys doing that with us. Again, the NautZone is a live show talking about the NFL, all of the happenings around the NFL from your friends here at Sportsnaut. I am your host, Scott Gulbransen, along with my co-host, Ryan Dyrud. He is the founder of the Los Angeles Football Network, part of our family here. He's on the West Coast. I am in the East Coast time zone. So we got you covered no matter where you are. And Ryan, I'm just glad to see, I know last week we had you on before the holidays too. We were talking and you were fighting off a cold. I know you're getting better now. By the way, you ran a half marathon. How did it go?
Well, I ended up doing the 10K. So it was the Huntington Beach half marathon. My mom flew out. She ran the entire 13 miles, did great, did under 3 hours. I did not train at all for it. And I, like you mentioned, have been sick for 2 weeks, but I still wanted to try. So the way that it was set up was basically the course was there and back, there and back. So the 10K was just there and back. And instead of doing the other 6, I was like, oh, we'll just be done at the 10K. So it was fun. Me and my wife did it. It was raining, pouring rain, but it was on the beach at Huntington. So can't beat that. But got a 10K in on New Year's Eve. So at least we did something.
That's good. Most people are just eating and drinking. So I give you and your wife both credit for getting out there and doing what's better for you. And that's exercising. So good deal for that. Well, let's jump into the football, man. I mean, listen, the NFL season is winding down. You know, when we go through like the first 4 or 5 weeks, for those of us who cover it and it's our job, man, you get to week 4 or 5, you're like, boy, week 18 seems like it's a year away. And suddenly we're at week 18. It goes by so quickly. And we've seen such an interesting NFL season between the number of quarterbacks that have come in and out with injuries to the surprise stories around the NFL. But we've gotten to the point now where we look at week 18, you have some teams already secured their playoff tickets. And so they're going to be sitting starters. We get into that situation. But we also have a couple big games. One of those games, of course, is the Sunday night game, the last Sunday night game of the year on primetime TV. The Dolphins are going to host the Bills. The winner of that game is going to win the AFC East. And the Bills they either win the AFC East or they don't even make the playoffs unless they get some other help. And we'll go down those scenarios. But that game is like an all or nothing for Buffalo. And then for Miami, who's really fallen off here in recent weeks, they sort of need a get-right game to get back kind of to their winning ways, get some momentum going into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's, you mentioned it. We looked at the slate of games, and there was a lot of intriguing ones, I think, even just 2 weeks ago of like, oh, man, these are going to be some really fun ones. And then the way things kind of played out over the last 2 weeks is a lot of them are meaningless now, notably the Rams and Niners game, both playing backup quarterbacks, resting a lot of players. You look at the Baltimore game, they're not playing starters, or at least not Lamar Jackson. So you kind of have this one marquee game of Dolphins Bills. And then you mentioned it pre-broadcast that you have the Texans Colts game, which maybe nationally isn't as exciting, but it is a lot of intrigue because, two upstart teams that, Indy lost their 4th overall draft pick quarterback, and they've still held together with Gardner Minshew. And the Texans with CJ Stroud drafted 2nd with the rookie head coach and DeMeco Ryans have played really, really good football. And, he's obviously up for rookie of the year in terms of CJ Stroud, and DeMeco Ryans probably even up for coach of the year as well. So 2 really, really good games. The rest are kind of, fluff before we get to the playoffs. But hey, we got 2 to look forward to. And anytime it's NFL Sunday, it's still always fun.
Yeah, and I'm interested because I think we talked about this last week, perhaps, or the week before, which is I like Miami. I enjoyed watching them. They have really fallen off. A lot of that has been due to injury. I mean, you look at the injury to Tyreek Hill. By the way, today, Tyreek Hill's house caught on fire. Thank goodness nobody was home, or whoever was home got out. Nobody was hurt. But Tyreek Hill has been out. You have now Jalen Waddle's been out. You have Tua Tagovailoa, who now has a shoulder injury. We don't know how severe. It looks like he's going to play. Everything's going to be fine. But they're really banged up. And then that defense, who kind of started off a little rocky, got very good, has now fallen back. When you look at that Dolphins team, I said it before. I thought they were still a year away from being a team that could make maybe a deep playoff run. They could be one and done this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the injuries, and on defense, Bradley Chubb now done for the year on a meaningless play in the game last week with an ACL. Xavier Howard banged up as well in the secondary. So, injuries. What's hard with the Dolphins is, absolutely injuries are an absolute factor. But when you look at Vic Fangio as your DC, and I know it's year one, so it takes some time to implement, but still a lot of talent across the board. I know Ramsey was injured early in the year and then now has been back, but you would think they'd still be a better overall unit than what they are. So I don't follow closely enough of the Dolphins to
Mm-hmm.
know if it's systemic issue, if it's schematic issue, if it's buy-in issue. Injuries obviously play a part, but every team in the NFL has to deal with injuries. It's about how you overcome those injuries. And defensively, I mean, they just have not given up 56 points just last week to a very good Baltimore team, but Baltimore hasn't scored that many points on anybody, even with the turnovers they've been able to get. So something is clearly wrong in Miami. And I agree, Scott. Like, they were a team that had a lot of hype. I agree with you that they were kind of a year away, but as the season went on, kind of became the darling of the NFL. And now it looks like they'll be lucky to maybe even compete in a playoff game, let alone win one.
Yeah, and then on the other side of it, on the other side of that one, you look at the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills, such an up and down year, right?
Mhm.
Super Bowl kind of aspirations and people putting them in the conversation on the AFC side, along with Cincinnati, along with Baltimore, along with Kansas City. Those were sort of the four teams, I think, going into the preseason. Everybody thought about, wow, these are teams that are going to make some noise in the AFC. They falter. They have lots of issues. Of course, it starts the first week of the season losing to losing to New York, the Jets, as Aaron Rodgers goes down after 4 plays. They fire their offensive coordinator. They seem to get better. Then they fall back again, and then they bounce back once again. Josh Allen, amazing year, continues to do what he does. But I'm looking at this game, and people out there, you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. But Sean McDermott, the head coach, so much has gone wrong this year. Of course, he had his 9/11 comments, all that jazz as well. So the drama's been heavy. But
Mhm.
I look at this game and I think if he loses the game and they don't make the playoffs, he could lose his job. I mean, technically, it seems crazy, but there's been chatter about it anyway because they've been so disappointing. So you see that you put the AFC title on the line, the AFC East title, all that stuff. That's got some really amazing kind of undercurrents as well from a story perspective for the Bills.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've talked about this before, Scott, but it shows that when you have a franchise quarterback, your leash as a coach is very, very short.
Yes.
Even with the success they've had, not reaching the next level and that next tier with Josh Allen, the coach is the one that gets blamed. When you're a coach that maybe has some success, but not to the level everyone wants, but you don't have that franchise quarterback, it seems like that leash is long. I've talked a lot on our show. I don't need to get into it, but I talk a lot about Kyle Shanahan with San Francisco, how, great coach, not taking anything away from him, but it seems like every year they fall short, the talk is, well, he didn't have a quarterback or his quarterback got hurt or this or that. Whereas with a guy like Sean McDermott or others that we can probably point to, there's no excuses. He has his franchise QB and whatnot. So, it's unfortunate. I think he is a good coach. He rebuilt the culture there in Buffalo. Kind of they gave him plenty of time to build it, to develop Josh Allen. He loses his OC, Brian Dable, to the Giants. It didn't look like they had a very good relationship anyway, so maybe that was a good thing. But for whatever reason, they have not been able to get over that hump. And the big thing with them, Scott, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Defensively, maybe somewhat, but I just feel like for sure offensively and somewhat as a team, they just don't really have an identity. Like, it seemed like
Yes.
in years past they kind of did, but now they really don't. Like, some weeks they're a great running team. James Cook looks great. And then some weeks it's like Josh Allen, just go make a play. Like, just go do something. I mean, I think he's responsible for like 80% of the team's offensive points or something like that in rushing and passing. So it's almost like they rely too much on his talent and less on having an offensive identity of what to do. And I think that's been a reason why it's been such a roller coaster season.
Yeah, and that's why I think McDermott is in trouble because that I see the same thing you do, which is, hey, just put Josh Allen out there and let him do stuff. Like, okay,
Yeah.
he's going to throw the ball, he's going to run the ball, figure it out. And so I don't see any cohesive offensive plan there. And when you have a franchise quarterback like that, how could you not have that? So yes, they get rid of their OC, they bring in they bring in a replacement, they do all that, but at the end of the day, that's on the head coach. And how do you go into a season not having that plan. And Cook is a good running back, so I don't understand why they don't get more out of him. You look at the defense, you have some age issues over there as well. We said it earlier in the year, right, that their window was kind of closing, and it closed really fast. And I think when they faltered on offense, it's really put them into a bind. And now it's hard to get out of. Now you find yourself in a place where you got to win in Miami, the last game of the season, to get into the playoffs. And that's nothing anyone anticipated. Now, if Josh Allen was out for the year, like you've seen in New York with Rodgers or in Cincinnati with Burrow, you could understand that, right? Because you lose your franchise guy. But to me, that's why you have to be able to pick it up and go. And they just haven't been able to do that. They've been very disappointing. And I know nobody more disappointed than the folks up in Buffalo there. But you look at the rest of the field. Go ahead, Brian. Did you have something to say on that or no?
I was just going to ask you one thing, like also what's going on with Von Miller? I mean, such a premier guy, healthy scratch last week, obviously some off the field stuff that we don't have to get into, but I'm sure that's a factor. But man, out here in LA, when the Rams kind of offered him and missed and Buffalo came up with a bigger offer, it seemed like doomsday out here, like missing out on Von Miller. And now it seems like an absolute blessing that they didn't get stuck with that contract. So, I mean, what's going on with Von Miller? That's another culture thing where it's like, why is that not working?
Right. Why is that not working? Is it something more with Von? Obviously, the off the field issues is not football related, but are there things that carry over the football field? Has he not been himself? Obviously, the injury earlier in the year. But if you look at that and you say, what's going on? To your point, it just seems like not everything is jiving in Buffalo. You don't have the right stuff going on in the locker room, around the team. And that usually points to the need for, or sometimes the desire for some people to have change. So it'll be interesting. That game's going to be big for both those squads. I think bigger for Buffalo because Miami's sort of at the beginning of their ascension, I believe, and they will only get better next year in my book. So we'll see how that all runs out too. And then, of course, you mentioned the Houston game, the Houston Colts game. Here's another one to the point. The Colts lost their quarterback, Anthony Richardson, the young draft pick, of course, came out of Florida last year. And Gardner Minshew has jumped in there and done pretty well overall. And that defense has helped them significantly, too. Going against C.J. Stroud, who right now looks to be, even though Puka Nacua has a great argument, we all know how awards go. They tend to go to quarterbacks. And so it looks like C.J. Stroud is a shoo-in, or at least close to Rookie of the Year, even though he missed 2 games. But that team in Houston, DeMeco Ryans, has done such a great job down there. That's been an amazing surprise because they really don't have that much talent, but they were able to put it together. They asked C.J. Stroud, hey, what if this Tank Dell kid? We want to see this kid. Would you want to work with him? Would you want us to draft him? And they did, and it's worked out great. Of course, he's been injured here the last several weeks and out for the season. But what they've done in Houston is pretty remarkable when you consider most people pick them to win maybe 2 or 3 games this year.
100%. And that just shows what good coaching can do, culture building can do, and then obviously good quarterback play, which is probably most important out of all of that. And, it's why teams, we talked about this, a few weeks ago with Carolina, right? Like, why can't David Tepper and their thought was, okay, we got the number 1 overall pick. We're the worst team last year. We can have a quick turnaround because if we have the right coach, we have the right culture, we have the right quarterback. Those are the 3 keys to success. We saw Jacksonville do it after a really bad year. They bring in Doug Peterson to make the playoffs. Now we're seeing Houston do it, have the number 2 overall pick, go get their quarterback. They make a home run hire with DeMeco Ryans, and they're now in line to potentially win the division if they win this game. So huge hats off to that staff and what they've been able to do and build. And across the sideline, Scott, the same goes for Shane Steichen in Indianapolis. I mean, another team that was, drafting 4th overall. And there's been at the very beginning of his tenure, Chris Ballard was seen as potentially the best executive in football, then had some floundering drafts. And then this year seems like he's turned it right again. And this is without their star quarterback. They're sitting at 9-7 right now with a chance. And that shows, we also talked about this, the importance of having a good backup. And Gardner Minshew certainly is that. So this might be, maybe I can ask you this as a question, not to change the subject completely, but in my opinion, I'm biased. I think Sean McVay deserves to be up there in the conversation. But in my opinion, Kevin Stefanski is probably the leader in the clubhouse for Coach of the Year. But this game might decide the Coach of the Year between Shane Steichen and DeMeco Ryans, who are certainly up there as well.
It's incredible if you look at what both those guys, and I agree 100% with you on McVay and on these 2 guys. You look at the situation, these teams, again, like I said, most of them predicted to win between, I think the Colts, most publications had them winning 6, 7 games maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and had the Texans winning 3 or 4 games.
Yeah.
And here they are, they're both fighting for their 10th win on Sunday. So that shows you what a great job that coaching staff has done. And two different guys, right? Steichen, an offensive guy, D'Amico Ryans, a defensive guy, although he had offensive experience too. So you see what they've been able to do. They've both been able to work with young quarterbacks before Richardson went out, obviously. And Shane Steichen also one of my dudes from UNLV. So you got to appreciate that. So I root for him. I don't root for the Colts, but I root for Shane to do well for that. But you look at the rest of the field on the AFC side, we talked about the Bills still trying to play their way in. The Jaguars got to win on Sunday too if they want to get in the playoffs, as do the Colts. And then the Texans and the Steelers are all still there. So AFC side, pretty close. On the NFC side, Ryan, you got the Buccaneers and the Packers. The Packers are going to play the Bears. You also have the Seahawks at 8-8, the Saints at 8-8. Those four teams really fighting for those last couple spots there, or last spot. And if you look at it, Buccaneers had a great chance to punch their ticket last week and got the crap beat out of them at home by New Orleans, something no one ever saw. And then you have the Bears who ended the Lions' playoff hopes last year. The Lions ended the Packers' playoff hopes last year. Now the Bears get to play the Packers in the last game of the season with the same thing on the line. The Packers' chances of making the playoffs have improved, but if they beat the Bears, they're in. If they lose to the Bears, they're out. So a lot at stake with these bubble games.
Absolutely. And, I think speaking of, since we kind of have the theme of coaching right now, I think there's not been a lot of talk about Matt LaFleur in Green Bay and kind of the job he's done. And he was a guy that I'll admit, like, I even thought he kind of rode the coattails of being in the McVay tree. And then obviously when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, that certainly makes your job a hell of a lot easier. And so it was like, okay, what is he really made of as a coach without Rodgers, kind of getting out of the shadow now, being a few years from McVay? What can he do? And it started off certainly rocky. And it's like, he's a guy that might be on a hot seat very quickly. It might be one of those guys that everyone says you're a product of your quarterback. And I think the development we've seen in Jordan Love as quarterback and the progression that them as a team have made with subpar defensive coordinator play. I know there's a lot of defensive play. I know there's been a lot of talk about, will they move on from Joe Barry and have a new DC next year? But the fact that they're in the conversation for the playoffs, have a shot to win and the development of Jordan Love, I think Matt LaFleur deserves a lot of credit for kind of keeping that team together and what they've built. And man, if Jordan Love is the real deal, which I'm not ready to say that quite yet, but he certainly is trending that direction. I mean, man, that franchise certainly knows how to select quarterbacks and have a good one after a good one after a good one and never miss a beat.
Well, and you're right about LaFleur too. I mean, you look at the progression of Jordan Love. He kind of had, at the beginning of the season, he had a couple of good weeks, and then he fell off considerably and now has rallied. And so you have to look to the coaching for that. People often think that because a player is now a professional, they don't need coaching. It's the actual opposite of that everybody needs coaching, especially a young player like Love taking over in that situation, starting in the NFL like he is now. And yeah, you got to give them credit for what they've done there, even though they're sort of on the outside looking in now. But again, 8-8 right now. They can finish with a winning record and get into the playoffs if they get in, which it was supposed to be a rebuilding year for them too. So this just goes to show you, we talk about this is the dream of the NFL, right, Ryan, is that all of these teams are still alive. And while some of them, their chances are much thinner than others, the fact is that we go back to the final 2 weeks of the season and we don't have the full playoff field yet is exactly what the NFL wants. And it shows the parity, whatever you want to call it, but it also shows that teams who have a bad year like this year, maybe you won 6 or 7 games, they're only one season and a couple savvy moves away from turning things around. And I think that's what keeps this sport at the forefront of everybody's mind and why it continues to break television viewing records is because everybody, no matter where you're at, you feel like you have your chance. Outside of Carolina this year and a couple others, maybe New England, and they've had their share. Sorry, New England.
Yeah.
Outside of that, everybody else has felt like at least till late in the year, you still had a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of it. The parity is what makes this league so great compared to other leagues that you see the final few teams every single year, or maybe a newcomer comes in every now and then, but it's typically The elite NHL, I think, has good parity, but we won't get into that. But for sure, NBA and MLB seems to always be the same cast of characters overall. And so yeah, that's what makes it so great. And obviously the schedule, the week 18 is new, but the schedule's been like this for a while, where you end with your division. But that makes it so great because we see where these, we talked about with Dolphins Bills, where it could be decided division winner or someone not even making the playoffs. So it just brings so much nuance and excitement to it. And, yeah, it makes this league so fun. And the last thing I'll say quickly before I move on about kind of these coaches that we've just kind of rounded up, what's because we'll get to now coaching hires here, not on the show, but in the next coming weeks. Black Monday, unfortunately, coming up, and we'll get to this new kind of coaching cycle. And every year, Scott, there's always the sexy coaching hire. There's always that was a bad coaching hire, and there's kind of just the forgotten coaching hire. I'm just like, we'll see, like whatever. Shane Steichen was kind of that to me. Like, I liked him a lot. He, former Charger guy, was a wide receiver coach of the Chargers, became the offensive coordinator. And then obviously was with Philadelphia in their run last year. And so I liked it, but he was kind of a forgotten guy, right? Like he went to Indy and was just kind of a guy not talked about. D'Amico Ryans was kind of like the sexy hire. Obviously Sean Payton was the big newsy, splashy hire. But it just shows that sometimes those forgotten guys or that don't get talked about a lot can actually end up being one of the best hires of the cycle. And I think we'll probably see that again this year. You have your big Jim Harbaugh, you got is Bill Belichick and elsewhere. You have the sexy Ben Johnson, but there's going to be one of those coaches that kind of gets hired and everyone's like, okay, whatever, let's move on. And they always surprise people.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, of course, that newer generation of coaches is coming up now, right? You're talking about Mike McDonald in Baltimore is another guy. Was at Michigan, went back to Baltimore. Now maybe will be in line for a head coaching job, as well as some of the coordinators, Raheem Morris in Los Angeles, right? So there's all these guys that are going to be, and we will talk about all that starting next week as we see some more axes fall. There might even be a couple surprise firings that we're not even expecting, or guys move locations. You just don't know what's going to happen. Mike Vrabel, for example, I don't think he's going to get fired, but he could very easily go somewhere else, especially if Belichick leaves New England and he has a desire to go there. We'll see, but we'll be on top of it all here. I want to switch gears now, Ryan, to quarterbacks, a couple of quarterback subjects. The first one we're going to get to is we have a piece up on Sportsnaut today about Justin Fields and the Bears. This is one of the intriguing questions. We talk about the Bears playing the Packers this weekend, but once we get past that, we now it looks like Matt Eberflus is going to be able to stick in as Bears coach. It sounds like they're committing to one more year with him at least to see what happens, to continue what he's been doing towards the back half of the season, which has been pretty remarkable. The Bears have played much better football on both sides of the ball. That includes Justin Fields since he got back from his thumb injury. The issue is the guy you covered in Los Angeles, Caleb Williams at USC, will be the number one pick. Whoever the number one pick is, right now it's the Bears. If they don't trade out of that slot, and I heard some people say, well, they might draft Marvin Harrison first. I doubt it. They might trade down a couple spots and get Harrison anyway if they want to get a big bounty. But if they stick where they're at and they draft Caleb Williams and decide to say goodbye to Justin Fields, it's a big decision for the Bears because, look, Fields has had his problems, right? He's had a good back half of the year. He's got 20 touchdowns, 40 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, 38 career fumbles. He's turned the ball over way too much. But you've seen the flashes. You've seen the ability there. He's mobile. He can run, yes, but he can also throw the ball. So the Bears have to make that decision. Is it Justin Fields, or do we kind of reset a couple years later with Caleb Williams, who's viewed by most scouts, right, as a generational quarterback? Interested to hear your thoughts on how you think that might go down, because you've watched Caleb Williams during his time at USC.
Yeah, so without being too long-winded, because I want to get your thoughts too, I'll say what I would do, and then I'll say what I think the Bears will do. If it was me, I would personally take any of these top probably 5 quarterbacks in this draft over Justin Fields. And I never want to be disrespectful. Justin Fields is a great talent. I never was a huge guy just in terms of huge talent and ability, but just in terms of his progressions and how he can read defenses. Like, I just always thought that was lacking. The arm talent and the physicality is there, but he's missed 11 games over 3 years, 41 turnovers over that time. I mean, there's just not enough good stuff that tells me going into year 4 when a contract's going to be coming up, that I'm ready to commit to that. And Caleb Williams obviously covered him. I know there's been some people getting down on him now because of some games this year, but I think overall he's a generational talent. Just has to be in the right system a little bit. Drake May obviously has a lot of talent. Michael Penix Jr., who everyone saw in that semifinal, that probably didn't watch a lot of Washington football. We didn't cover them, but watched a lot of Michael Penix Jr. If he's in the right system, I think he's a slam dunk. I know Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. That's more of a Fieldsy type pick, so maybe I wouldn't go him necessarily. But there's a lot of guys in this draft that I would feel good about. And I would do that because, A, you're restarting your QB contract as a rookie contract.
Mm-hmm.
You can trade out of the first pick and get as everyone said, a bounty of picks. Like they're saying this year, because of the talent at quarterback, the Bears can get more return for that one than what last year's trade got because of the talent there. So they can get a huge bevy of that. Whereas if they don't do that, it's going to be, so I was saying it opposite. I would still take a guy, but if they do that and roll with Justin Fields, I understand that's what they will do because I think they can get a lot to build around Justin Fields. So I would go after one of the early guys, reset my quarterback timeline. I think they'll keep Justin Fields, get a bounty of picks, and try to use those to build around Justin Fields, if that makes sense.
So you don't think they're going to take Williams?
Correct. I would. I think they'll roll with Fields and trade out of the pick.
Interesting. Yeah, I see. I'm thinking it's going to be the opposite. Maybe that's just because I think that Williams is that good. And I hear what you're saying about people getting down on him. And listen, you can't. Did he have some poor performances? Yes, but what quarterback doesn't? And I think that the spotlight has been so high on him. I know there's been some questioning of his attitude and things, missing press conferences and stuff like that. But the reality is, I mean, look, you're in college. There's a lot of pressure on you. I get it. In the pros, you can't do that, but also you're getting paid at that point. It's a different ballgame. So I like it. And listen, I think that we are now in a time where you might reset quarterback. Like in the example of Justin Fields, I think Justin Fields could go elsewhere and develop his game and become a better quarterback. Okay. Will he ever be as good as Caleb Williams? If Caleb Williams comes in the NFL and lights it up, probably not. Different skill set, kind of a different type of player in many ways. But I do think that you might see this more. I mean, we saw it. You go back to the Josh Rosen pick, right, in Arizona with Kyler Murray. You've seen it in other spots. I had people tell me, no way the Giants will draft a quarterback this year because they just gave Daniel Jones all that money. Ask Russell Wilson how that worked out. I just think that the quarterback position is so important in today's NFL, and teams recognize whether it's the right way or the wrong way. And we've talked about how they don't develop young players when we were talking a few weeks ago about the expanding the roster, right? Expanding the practice squad, as you had suggested. And that is, you just don't get time to develop like you used to. And if that's the case, I think you're going to see this more. You get a guy mid first round, even top first round. If after a couple of years they're not doing it, and you haven't improved that much, and you can get a quarterback up in the top of the draft, go get another one. Why not?
Yeah.
Don't double down on your mistake and wait another 5 years so you're fired. Instead, say, you know what, we're going in, we're getting another quarterback. And so that's why I think Chicago may do that. I can also see your argument, though. I think keeping the coach, to me, tips off a little bit that they might be leaning in the direction of keeping Justin Fields. Because if not, they would have maybe been able to reset because, hey, we got a new system coming in. Everything started over. Might as well go get a new quarterback. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with that story. But the Bears really haven't had a consistent quarterback since 1950. So for them, this is a big deal. I think they have to get this one right, whichever way they go. And it's going to be huge for the history, or for the future, I should say, not the history, the future of that program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what's hard with Fields, he just hasn't consistently given that level of play. Like he has the highlights, right? Like if you throw on the YouTube highlights, like, oh wow, look at this guy pops off. He can make all the throws, he can run, but the turnovers, the inconsistency, the injuries, and this is the one thing, Scott, I'll end on this that doesn't get talked about. And I don't think I necessarily believe this, but now that I've covered both college and pro in unison, it's something that in my opinion, I think is very important. It doesn't get talked about. Obviously, at quarterback, you have your generational talents that can play anywhere. But scheme fits, culture fits is way more important. I think a lot of people give credit for. Bryce Young, right? I don't think he's good. I think he is still a good prospect that can be good, but he didn't have the same fit, culture, buy-in that CJ Stroud has had in Houston. I don't think CJ Stroud is that much of an elite player, better than Bryce Young. Now, some guys do just develop quicker in the NFL. That's fact, but it just doesn't go like that sometimes. And so when you look at Justin Fields, what's been interesting is there hasn't seemed to be a fit with Lou Getsy. I mean, there's been talks all the time. Like he's even said like, well, he didn't call the play right, or he's blamed his OC on the play calling. OC has blamed him on not running the plays he's called or whatever. And so if they do run it back, they either think they can get it right, or it's Getsy saying like, okay, we know we need to change the system better to fit his needs. And when you look at these rookie quarterbacks coming in, it's going to be important that they go to systems where they fit. Because, for instance, a Michael Penix Jr. fits great in a Sean Payton system, in a Shanahan, Sean McVay system. Like that it's a read system where you have to be really intelligent, but it's you're making a critical read at the start. You got to be a pocket passer. That wasn't Russell Wilson. That's why he didn't fit. He's more off script. When you look at Caleb Williams, I think he can play in anything, but he would be much better in like an Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy system where it's a lot more go off script, go use your talents, go use your pure talent ability to make plays. So fits are a big thing that no one really talks about. So it'll be interesting to see where these guys land.
Yeah, no question. And like I said, huge decision for Chicago. Our last subject on the quarterbacks here is, of course, we have the College Football National Championship. Yes, we're an NFL show, we know, but these two guys that are playing at quarterback in this game, J.J. McCarthy and also Michael Penix Jr., who you spoke about, who had just a phenomenal game. A lot of people were down on Penix Jr., and then he shows out in the bowl game, and suddenly everybody's like, well, he's moving back into the first round. He's always had that ability. I understand the injuries to the knees and then, of course, the shoulder, people concerned. When I watch him throw, I don't have any concern with his shoulder. His knees, you could be concerned as a pro. I think it might hurt him still a little bit. If he goes out and balls out in the national championship game and puts up numbers like he did in the semi, maybe not so much. But people use his age against him. He's 23 years old. So what? I think you look at him and even J.J. McCarthy. Look, J.J. McCarthy, up until the last month and a half, some people want to say it's because they stopped cheating. Others can see that they stopped throwing the ball towards the end of the season. They kind of changed up their offense a little bit, their approach. J.J. McCarthy's another guy who early on was considered a first rounder. Now he's moved into the second round. Some people have him second day, further than that. And he's all over the place. But when you look at these two young quarterbacks, I think they're both good examples. Because you talk about Penix Jr., yes, he can be a pocket passer, no question about it. He's not a runner, but he is a mobile quarterback. He's a functionally mobile quarterback, as is J.J. McCarthy. This is what you're seeing come out of college, and this is the prototype future of the NFL quarterback. It's already here. It hasn't taken over the league completely, but I think Penix Jr. and McCarthy are both good examples of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so hard with J.J. McCarthy specifically. And I'm curious your kind of thoughts. And I'm like, he's a guy that, I don't really see it necessarily where I'm like, you watch, specifically that game against, Michigan didn't really play a very staunch schedule throughout the season. That was a big knock on them going into this game. Right. They won rightfully so. Like they're obviously one of the best teams in America, but going against an Alabama defense, like they didn't win that game because J.J. McCarthy like lit the world on fire and pushed the ball down the field. Now, but he's one of those guys that I don't really see it, but then I have this weird feeling that because he kind of is in that prototypical NFL system, he can go into the league and actually really develop quickly and be good because he does have the tools. I just haven't seen enough of it without watching every single Michigan game. Michael Penix Jr., to me, as I mentioned, so I won't get long-winded, one of the best arms in this entire draft. The ball placement is unbelievable. Pocket presence is great. But to me, it's going to be really important where he ends up and which offensive system. I don't think he's a guy just plug in anywhere and he's going to light it up. Like it's going to be a system that fits what he does well, and then he can thrive. But obviously, it's going to be a fun showing seeing them on Monday. But what's your thoughts on them too, and kind of how they shake out?
Yeah. I clearly think Penix is head and shoulders better and better prepared to enter the NFL and play right away. No question about it. I think J.J. McCarthy, there is some things I see in his game, but I think he's not the kind of guy you take and count on being your starting quarterback from day one, where I think Penix could be. I really do think he could do that. And so with McCarthy, I think that's a guy you're going to take. He might go in the second round, lower second round maybe. And that's fine for a team maybe who's already got a quarterback, an aging quarterback, an older quarterback, and they're looking for somebody to develop. Because you know what? You get him on that rookie contract, you see how he does, and if he's not great, guess what? After a few years, you say goodbye, and that's it. And then you go get another quarterback. So to me, I like some of it, but you're right. Who they played, you look at the big games, and then look, it might be coincidence, but after the cheating scandal stuff came on and they fire Connor Stallions, he throws one touchdown pass the rest of the year. I mean, you can't ignore that. Whether or not it's the cause of it or not, I can't say either. But it's awfully weird that that happens after all that goes down, and he was lighting it up before and being able to pass for touchdowns all the time, and suddenly just stops. Just stopped. So I think that, pro scouts obviously see something there, but I'm sure it's much more of a developmental thing than it is a guy who's going to come in and start right away.
Yeah. And look, like Heisman voters, which is a whole different story, they can just look at pure stats and not watch any game film and who you did it against, right? Jaden Daniels had 11 touchdowns against 2 D2 schools, and that's what pushed his stats to the top and gave him the Heisman. NFL scouts and GMs are looking at what did you do in the games that mattered most. And Michael Penix Jr. just put on display against a very good Texas team that he's NFL ready. And I honestly believe, like, I don't want to get too down a rabbit hole, but Denver obviously probably moving on from Russell Wilson. I don't think they believe that Stidham's like their future. Obviously, they want to see what they have him down the stretch. But I truly believe if they end up in the top, 12 and need to move up to 7 or 8 to take him, I think Penix could start week 1 next year and be a perfect fit in that Sean Payton offense. So, but it'll be fun to see how it ends up.
Yeah, he would fit perfect in that offense. There's no question. I think that's if you look at spots for him too, other spots for him too. Atlanta's another one, not just because they need a quarterback, but I think he fits there too. There's a couple of good spots, and you know what? Actually, the Rams. Yeah. The Rams, as they have to, as great as Stafford is doing right now, you got to start thinking about the future, right? Yep. Now, maybe it's too soon, but in McVay's system, I think he'd be phenomenal as well.
Oh yeah, and the Rams have a first-round pick this year, finally.
There you go. So we'll see how it all goes down. But it's going to be interesting watching that college football championship game on Monday, of course, the big game. Okay, the Bills and the Dolphins. You got to give me a winner here, Ryan. Who you got in that one?
I'm going to go Bills. Too much on the line for them. I think Josh Allen gets it done. And Miami, as you mentioned, has just kind of been reeling these last weeks. Obviously, unfortunate Tyreek Hill situation with his house. Not saying that could be a huge distraction, but maybe it is. The defense is reeling. So if we're going score, I'll go Bills 27, Dolphins 17.
There you go. I also like the Bills. I'm going to go a little bit higher score. I think the Dolphins, even without some of those weapons, are going to be able to score and actually run the ball against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to say it's going to be 31-28. So it's going to be a closer game. Nice. But I do like the Bills putting up the ball and Josh Allen having a good day. I think that Dolphins defense is just too banged up, and I think that they're going to take advantage of that. So we'll see. And then next week we will get on and we'll be able to talk about the wild card matchups coming up next week, and it's going to be fun, man. Getting ready for Las Vegas, the Super Bowl coming up in just a few weeks. Can't believe it's already here. It's going to be a good time.
Crazy. Season always goes by way too fast, and then it doesn't end even. There is no off season in the NFL, right?
Oh, no, none at all. And we'll be here for all of it. You can catch it, of course, at the LA Football Network. If you guys are out there and you're interested, no matter where you're at in Los Angeles football, make sure you check out Ryan's folks there at LA Football Network, and you can follow him on X at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. You can follow me at LV Gully. Also, make sure you check out Sportsnaut. Lots of coverage. We got so much stuff coming up regarding the NFL playoffs and, of course, the draft. Black Monday's coming. What are going to be the coaching changes? Where are those coaches going? What are those jobs going to be? Who are they going to fill the roles with? Mm-hmm. That's the question. All the candidates, all that stuff. We're going to have that all up on sportsnaut.com. Do us a favor also. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here. Hit that notifications bell so you know whenever we're live, which is here on this show every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We'll be back here talking the NFL with you. Ryan, have a great rest of your week, man, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, my friend. And hey, let's tease next week's episode. Where does Jim Harbaugh end up? LA or Las Vegas?
Good question. Or is there a third suitor that we just don't know about yet? Could be, right? There could be somebody else. But I think those two fits are the best. But we'll talk about that next week, because that rumor mill, especially with the championship game over, whether he wins or loses, it's going to be a big, big story. So we will visit that. I love that tease. Good job, man. All right. For Ryan Dyrud, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been the NautZone from sportsnaut.com. Take care, everybody.